on the topic of blue versus red, Waterloo.
Wrong era, wrong era.
Well, it's the same thing though. So we have the new Waterloo Black Powder starter set. Just look at this.
So this is
That
second edition
is
Black
that is
Powder.
amazing looking. Look at that.
So what are we seeing in this box?
So inside this set, you're going to get two armies effectively. So you've got the British and the French, as you might imagine.
Yeah.
But you've also got a whole bunch of other stuff in there as well. So you've got the Hanoverian infantry as well, which is really cool. And of course, they're sort of developing things a little bit. So you don't have to just play out the kind of stuff that was happening around Waterloo. So a lot of people in the comments were saying that there's some really nice stuff in here for like the 100 Days campaign and stuff, which is really cool. Because a lot of people were wondering about all those big greatcoats and everything like that. But I think it's nice to have things sort of stretch a little bit further out from what you're normally seeing in Waterloo and stuff. You also get two metal generals, so they're sort of unique to this set, which is really cool. So you got one French one. You're going to get the new rulebook, which is going to be sort of revamped and revitalized for people wanting to play games across all periods, not necessarily just stuff around the Napoleonic era. So
Ben, you're breaking up.
If you didn't
This
catch
is
a
Beast of
word of that,
Warcalling. Can't hear you.
Let me translate that. You get a whole lot of cool in the box. Bring up the image because I'm going to have a
which
crack
one?
at impressing my historical editor.
Oh, you got
I
the
am
full army?
prepared.
Okay,
Here's the full army.
So Jim, right?
Yes.
These guys at the bottom, these are Brits. These guys here, so they are Wellington's men. These look like the Imperial Guard to me, do they, with the great coats?
I'm not
And
really.
then, who are the Hanoverians? So the Hanoverians, not the cavalry guys on horseback.
no,
not the
the
Prussians.
Hanoverians are the guys in the center.
Oh, they're the
And
guys in the
above them-
center.
Hanoverian
the
regiments were part of the Allied coalition along with the Dutch. I'd be interested to see if this kit expands later on, maybe to include some regiments, some divisions from the Netherlands. But yeah, for Wellington that day, it really was an Allied army. And I'm very interested to hear, like Ben was saying a second ago, about the 100 Days campaign.
Yeah.
The 100 Days campaign takes place pretty much through the whole late winter and early spring of and into the early summer of 1815. It's the 100 days are the 100 days that leads up to Waterloo. So, I mean, it's roughly 100 days. It depends on how you count it up. But pretty much Waterloo is nothing more than the 100th day of the 100-day campaign.
Right.
And
No,
it's-
no, I want to try and get my timeline right on this, okay? So Napoleon had been sent off to, was it Corsica where he was imprisoned? Or he was imprisoned on an island. I think it was Corsica.
it was in that area. It was down in the northern part of the Mediterranean.
Right. He came back, right? And was it Marshal Ney then met him on the road and he was supposed to arrest him. And then Napoleon basically turned the soldiers that were there, turned them onto his side.
Like, shoot me in my heart.
Yeah,
Right
shoot me in my heart. Whoa! And it basically, he's such a dude. He really was such a dude. But he managed to turn them, right? And then he came back and he basically, fairly peacefully, basically took over France again. From that point, is that the starting point of the 100
Generally,
Days War?
yeah, generally. It's the 100 days. And again, there's going to be guys out there. LSR 2590, I'm calling you out, man. You got to get in the comments. You got to get below and you got to help us out here. We just want to make sure that we keep us straight here. And I also really want to get your opinion on this new set because he has a project in the project thread.
Yeah.
How to actually build, a Napoleonic regiment. How to build. Okay, there are 9 companies. Actually, there are 10 companies in the Napoleonic regiment. 1 grenadier, 1 light, 9 or 8 line companies. Which side of the formation the regimental colors go on, as opposed to the king colors. How many, the drums, the whole 9 yards. He's got it built down to the true Yeah, and it's mostly a tutorial as he's helping other people. Like if you want to really build a Napoleonic unit, so this is definitely his wheelhouse. I'll do the best I can, but generally speaking, the 100 Days encapsulates not the fall of the French Empire. French Empire is toast. French Empire is already gone.
Yeah.
Waterloo does not end the French Empire. French Empire is dead and buried already. This is the 100 Days where Napoleon makes a bid to bring it back.
Yeah.
So Napoleon was kicked out of power. He was forced to abdicate. This is after Battle of Leipzig, another battle that took place through 1814. He gets put on his island in, I always get the 2 islands mixed up. So I'm not going to say which one it was. It's the northern Mediterranean.
Yeah.
And then he escapes from there. He gets back to France and he starts it up again. He gets rid of Louis, I think it's Louis the 18th, is the king that took over again there. and he makes like another try. And the second people hear that Napoleon is back and the army is back behind him again, the Prussians find out about this, the Russians find out about this, the British, and they're all like, oh,
Yeah.
we've been dealing with this guy since 1799. We are not going through that again.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care what you're doing. You've just dropped it, and you are mobilizing everything you can. We're going to converge on this guy, and we're going to stamp him out before he really gets something going again.
Yeah, because they were worried about him picking up some momentum. And
Absolutely. And if he had won at Waterloo, now it's an open question. Could he have revived the French Empire? Could we have seen Napoleonic Wars phase 2 going, God forbid, into the 1820s? Who knows what
would
would
it
have
have been a
happened?
protracted war, or would the other countries have had enough forces to actually feed more in?
Yeah, there's a lot to it.
He would have faced the same difficulties he faced first time round.
The question really
the
would have
Russians
been,
still would have been.
Yeah, but this time he might not invade Russia.
Yeah.
well, he definitely wouldn't have done that. But the big question is, could the Allies have maintained their coalition? Because we're talking about British, Prussians, and Russians and Austrians, people who don't normally get along anyway in these days.
Yeah.
Number one. And number two, France has just been through 20 years of war.
Yeah.
And the political situation in France is not 100%. So as far as could Napoleon have maintained through a second whole phase of warfare, had he won at Waterloo, that's going to be an open question.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a fabulous box set, Jim. Now, there's. I would imagine you're one of your main areas of expertise is American Civil War, right?
American Civil War, American Revolution.
So, between this box set, right, I would imagine the battles are somewhat similar. You know, it's
The battles are very similar. The weapons are almost identical. The tables of organization are almost identical. The British regiment is still based on the one-line battalion, and that one-line battalion has the typical, at the time, 10 companies. 10 companies is 8-line companies of roughly, supposed to have a bayonet strength of about 56 men, but that's negotiable. And one company of grenadiers, one flank company of grenadiers, one flank company of light infantry. What most British commanders would do, and this is where you get into Sharp's practice and some of the other games, what most commanders would do in the American Revolution is, okay, I have 10 regiments. Okay, rather than just take those 10 regiments and fight with them, I'm going to take those 10 regiments, I'm going to strip all the grenadiers out of all those regiments, I'm going to strip all the light infantry out of all those regiments. So I'm going to have now my 10 slightly under strength line regiments, and now just a left fist of light infantry for screening of nothing but light infantry, and a right fist of nothing but grenadiers. And these are some of the things you see in the Saratoga campaign that we wrote about earlier. And these things are nasty. You know, just, like take all the shock troops out of all your units and compress it into one just super elite force of heavy infantry. Whether or not those tactics were heavily used in the Napoleonic Wars, where things were a lot more formal and the terrain was a lot more constricted, that part I'm not really sure. But the weapons are the same. The general line tactics are going to be the same. I say the weapons, I mean like the Brown Bess musket was still pretty much being used, almost without any kind of modification.
Because one thing, it's never occurred to me to ask, but was there such a thing as a cavalry charge or anything during the Wars of Revolution or the Civil Wars?
Yeah. It wasn't very often because, cavalry requires two things. Requires people who know what they're doing because it's a relatively advanced arm of the service. You need a lot of training. You need officers. You need people who do it. And it's expensive. You need a lot of money.
Yeah.
So in the American Revolution, you have exactly, I think, 2 regiments of the 17th and 16th Dragoons. Hopefully I didn't get that wrong. 2 British regiments of cavalry in the whole war, and they're not even there the whole time.
Yeah.
And on the American side, Americans don't really have a lot of the money or a lot of the expertise, because we had to borrow our expertise from places like Prussia and France. We had advisors come in from other countries to kind of teach us what we were doing, because a bunch of farmers, man, a bunch of metalsmiths. We don't really know what we're doing as far as fighting the biggest empire in the world at the time.
So the Battle of obviously one of the big things of the likes of the Battle of Waterloo was whenever the infantry would form into squares to try and protect themselves from the likes of cavalry charge. The look of the battle, if you were a general looking down on it, would look quite different.
Would be absolutely different.
Yeah.
So on this, and here's where we see the different levels of wargaming on the scale of this box set. Their battles are going to look largely similar, especially if, to go back to what Ben was saying before, you're sticking with a 100 days campaign.
Yes.
So these armies start to come together, and for 99 days, there's maneuver and skirmish, and this little company fights that little company. There's a small battle of 10,000 here, 5,000 here. This is where your skirmish gaming that you're going to get in games like Black Powder are really going to help out.
Yeah.
If anyone sets up a Black Powder army of Waterloo and does the whole battle, I mean, I'd love to come see that table. You know, please send an invitation.
You want to
Invite me! Invite me!
That's going to be an awesome table. But to set up even one line battalion at 1-to-1 scale and 28 millimeter, you're talking about 540 guys. That's going to look amazing, but it's going to be tough to do.
Yeah.
But again, so skirmish tactics. And at that skirmish level, the American Revolution and some parts of Napoleonic Wars, especially what you see in Sharp's rifles, the whole Spain and Portugal campaign, are going to look very, very similar. Some of the smaller engagements that you see in the 100 Days are going to look very similar. Where it really starts to completely blow out of any kind of recognition is when you zoom out. The anti-cavalry square, that you never saw that in the American Revolution. There was never enough cavalry. There was never enough infantry.
Yeah.
Largest battle in the American Revolution is Monmouth. There's maybe, you add up both sides, 20,000 men. Waterloo, you're pushing 250,000 if you include the Prussians. So it's 10 times the amount. And Waterloo wasn't even maybe the biggest battle in the Napoleonic Wars. There's Borodino, there's Leipzig, there's Austerlitz. There are some really big smackdowns in the in what some people like to call World War I, the true World War I, or maybe even 7 Years' War was the real World War I.
Yeah,
who knows? These are some really big conflicts.
It's extraordinary, you know. Whenever you think that that 250,000 men would be thrown into something like a Battle of Waterloo, that they didn't throw 100,000 men at trying to keep the Americas. You know, it's like, you know, why, you know,
there's a big difference there.
Yeah.
And one very big difference. Big ocean. Good luck getting that.
I don't know if it was
across
just
that.
logistics. There's got to be politics in play as well, you would think.
Geostrategic force projection is something that we've been talking about a lot lately on the site. And the ability of a nation to put an entire army and sustain it in war onto another continent is something that just hasn't been done. It is trillions of dollars, or the equivalent in those days. I mean, the amount of money it's going to take, no one's really ever been able to do it except even the United States.
So it really was a logistical impossibility to do it.
When I'll say this much, when Great Britain, this is a little off topic, when Great Britain loses the first couple of battles around Boston and quote unquote gets kicked out of the United States at the very beginning of the American Revolution, the first reaction out of Great Britain at the time is, "Oh no, you didn't." And they get Richard Howe and William Howe. They were brothers. One was the admiral, one was the general. And they put together the largest expeditionary force that Great Britain has ever had at the time, sent anywhere. So it wasn't from lack of effort. They were raising millions and millions of pounds. They were floating ships out of dry dock where they had been stored since the 7 Years' War. They came out the United States, or not the United States, they came out the American colonies with everything they possibly could at the time. And it comes out to an Army and Navy, a combined fleet of about 40,000 men.
Yeah.
Which was way more than even at its most optimistic figures, you know, anybody like Washington or the Second Continental Congress could even possibly match. Yeah. He was lucky if he had, on paper he had 20,000, but he had maybe 5.
Yeah,
and he's outnumbered 8-1. So guess what? He's going to lose. You know.
But they didn't.
Well, they did. And they lost again, and they lost again, and they lost again.
So they kept losing until they didn't.
We kept losing until we got some very powerful friends. Thank you, French. I will never stop thanking you for that.